have like two or three kind of personal things that are different than just cars. Okay. So, because the interesting thing is I actually saw your profile, right? That Crown put out. So you mentioned that you were adopted, and it wasn't birth, it was later, right?
Yeah.
So I was adopted at birth, which that immediately when I heard like adopted, I was like, okay, that's awesome. Like that's cool, because it is ironically kind of common, but it's maybe not talked about. You know what I mean? Like that's not something. So it's interesting because it's like, okay, there's another guy that was adopted, definitely a different situation. And so I'm sure that you have a different appreciation for that than I did, right? Because I didn't come out of a situation and later in life meet somebody that impacted me like your adopted father did, right? So my whole life has been the guy that's been my dad. That's just my adopted father. I've never met my biological parents. So I don't have that. Like, it seems like that would be so much more of an impact, which obviously it is because you talk about how amazing he was.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, like, I don't know. It's just so interesting. You know what I mean? Like, it's because I guess I'm just wondering, like, obviously it was meaningful, but at that moment, like, how does that moment, you kind of explained it a little bit, like, you were like, oh no, he's going to kick me out of the house. But really, like, how special is that moment? How special is that moment, though? You know what I mean? Like, because that's crazy.
You know, I think, and I can relate to what you're saying. It's two different situations, two different scenarios. Um, First off, I think your parents are incredibly great people. I think it's amazing that, you know, people for whatever reason, they can't have kids or whatever, are willing to bring a child in that's not their biological child and love it and raise it like their own, and they make that commitment. And, you know, good God, you know, I don't know your parents, but I can imagine you're a great person, so they've done a great job with you. You know, it takes a lot. Some people could never do that, right? Other people could do it all day long. And I have a weak spot in my heart for kids. You just got to know that, number one, especially ones that are struggling. Number two, people that do that, I kind of hold on a pedestal a little bit, because you know, you're taking a risk. You're taking a chance. My sister, through my adoption, or her husband, you know, they adopted a kid, and they're, you know, they were, it's my sister's second marriage, not to get in their personal life, whatever, but, you know, they're a good family unit. They raised, you know, 5 kids, and one wasn't their own. And they didn't think twice about any of that. They love them all the same, and do everything that they can in the world for them. But you're right. You know, it means a lot to you, especially as a teenager. You know, you're a teenager going through all that stuff, and, you know, shit, I was far from fucking perfect, but I was on the right path. And that's what I try to, when I talk to these kids, I tell them, you know, just whatever's going wrong, the influences, everything else, fuck everybody else. Just stay on the right path. You know, think about yourself and your future. You know, and if you do that, if you do the right things, you know, the little things in life you learn on how you interact with people can make such a big difference in the way that you carry yourself, mannerisms, you know, everything, blah, 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 blah. But I was on the right path. I was living on my own, but I was trying to go to school. You know, I had already set a goal for myself. As soon as I get out of fucking high school, I'm graduating high school. I'm not doing the GED thing. I don't look down on anybody, but I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm figuring it the fuck out, and I'm going in the Army. You know, and I still did, even after going and living with, you know, a good country lawyer and everything. I could have gone straight to college, but shit, why waste their money and flunk out, right? Um, but I do have just an astounding appreciation for the man that my dad was and I wasn't the only kid that he adopted, by the way, and I wasn't the only kid, you know, that he brought in and tried to do stuff for, and, you know, genuine, no pedophile bullshit or anything like that. It was a genuine. He looked at the person, the core person of who they were, and was always willing to give, you know, somebody a hand up to move along, you know, to the next journey. And yeah, it's special. You're in a weird fraternity that you never really think about, you know, but we are different because of that. We really are. We're loved. I think we're loved for who we are. and not made, and you have to be loved because they had you type of thing. And that's very different. I think we have a leg up, an advantage on people. I hate to say that out loud, but honestly, I think it's true. I think, knowing that you look at life differently, that personally, I think my psychology changed a bit when that happened. So I imagine that from your standpoint as well, I don't think anybody should ever hide it. But when you find that out, you're like, wow, somebody loved me enough, to bring me in, to their home and invest, in me and fought with them like fucking cats and dogs and gave them the finger behind their back and badmouthed them and everything else and whatever. And they still love me for it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I have I won't go too into detail about it, but when you're adopted at first, I think there's a little bit of a different psychological thing. Like, don't get me wrong, what you said is right about you appreciate your parents. You feel, like, holy crap, like they wanted me.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, when you're adopted at first, you sometimes have that moment of, why didn't that one want me?
Well, I never knew my dad. I never knew my biological father. And
Okay.
I'll just tell you, my mom was a fucking train wreck. And I asked my mom a few times, and I won't go into all of that, but I will tell you, I asked my mom like 3 different stages in my relationship with her, who's my dad. I got 3 different answers. Could have been all 3. She just may not have known. and that's the truth. But I never knew my dad. And so I can relate a little bit to that. I'd be 50-50, right? I knew my biological mother, left home. But I'm weird. I told you that, self-proclaimed. I kind of didn't give a fuck, honestly. I kind of looked at it like, I made my path in life with a lot of people around me influencing and helping move me along in the right direction. And those people got that experience of me. Whoever my biological father was, he missed out on all that. And you know what? That's it. It's not my loss. It honestly isn't. It's his loss. It's their loss. And I can understand a lot of people like, do you ever wonder, you ever want to go figure out? I'm like, I questioned, but I never questioned, why weren't they involved or whatever. I just assumed that they had their own issues. Everybody carries their own baggage. That was their shit. And, and in some cases, God only knows, they may have been a fucking train wreck and fucked me up. So part of me is like, well, maybe I'm kind of glad I didn't know who it was. It wouldn't have made me who I am.
Yeah. I've always made the joke, unless my real dad is Bill Gates, I don't care. Like, at the time, Bill Gates was the richest man. So now it would be,
Elon Musk.
Elon. Yeah. But
or the president of GameStop.
Right. Yeah, right. But it's interesting, though, because it's one of the things. But so I won't go into it in detail, but we'll put it this way. Like, my dad's parents, so my grandma, my dad's mom, was really into genealogy, right? So family history. They bought like a freaking house in a tiny town just because some distant relative owned it, like in the 1800s. Like, just kind of whack jobs. You know what I mean? Like,
to each their own. We buy cars, they buy ancestral houses.
No, right. But so she didn't like me because I wasn't blood, right? So the family name died with my dad. And so she never liked me, it was really one of those things where when you're growing up, it messes with you. And she didn't like my mom either because she blamed her for not being able to have kids. And it's like, it's ridiculous. But so
everybody carries their own baggage.
Right. But me growing up was like, there was a lot of interesting little internal monologues that would happen along with adoption. And predominantly, it was all positive. It was like, I'm very thankful. I'm very lucky. Like, everybody says they have the greatest parents on earth, right? But I truly am like, that's not the BS line with me. I'm like, dude, I really do. Like, I couldn't imagine any other people that I would want to have as parents. And I couldn't imagine, like, I was very fortunate that my mom's parents were amazing. Like, I never got to know her mom because she had Alzheimer's by the time I was kind of aware. But her dad was like the most amazing guy in the world. Like, he's my idol. Like, he's my angel. You know what I mean? So like, it's wild because just one of those things where it's like, I look at all these things, like, I don't know, for me, coming from birth, it's like there's just times where I have these crazy thoughts of like, what ifs? And they don't last very long. It's not depressing. It's nothing like that. It's just like the stars align to get me to where I am, and I'm so lucky. I mean, I'm luckier than a lot of my friends that are like not adopted. And I'm like, dude, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I'm like, sorry, but it worked out for me. So I was just curious because I think that's something that some people might not realize. Like if they're talking to somebody or trying to get to know somebody, we'll put it that way. Like I've dated people and I bring up adoption and they don't maybe sometimes realize some of like the stuff that goes on inside your head.
Right.
So it's always interesting to hear other people's stories and yours being a little bit, you know, later on in life. I was like, man, he's got to appreciate that so much more than.
Yeah. And what's funny is I see, I look at kids through a different lens, especially at my age now. And it's funny because I'm a lot older than, right now I'm older than my dad was when I first met my dad. But we do supercar birthdays for kids down here in Atlanta. It's something that I started a year ago when COVID kicked off. And, you know, I got a lot of great people in the car community here in Atlanta is just awesome. So we were doing these drive-bys and a buddy of mine that I used to work with, his wife, as a school teacher, we got connected with her and she was setting a lot of these up and she got us connected with the Boys Village or Boys Lodge here in Cumming, Georgia. And we've been by there 4 times. The second time we went by, there's a kid there that just made an impression on me. 16 years old. I'm looking at him, seeing myself at that age, 100%. You know, I can't talk about. Well, I shouldn't. I don't. Well, I didn't say anything about the name of the place, but you know, mom passed. I don't think dad's involved. Grandmother can't take care of him, so he's in this place. And I just like, oh my God, we took him out. We've taken him out a couple of times. Took him out shopping, got a bunch of clothes and stuff. I got some clothes for Christmas, and you just look at somebody in that situation. And I'm like, I don't want him there. I don't want him here. I want him out of there. And I want to give him every opportunity that I can. At some point, you realize that you can't save the world, but you know you can influence and you can change a life. You know, and help people. And I think that's the biggest thing. It took a lot to get there too. I mean, I was self-centered as shit, and I still am. I mean, you know, the world revolves around me, and I feel that way sometimes, but not really. But sometimes really, you know, that's who I am. But you know, inside of my heart, I look at these kids, you know, and the stuff that they're going through, and you're just like, you know, God, I wish I could take everything in here and give it to them. Just take every bit of what's in my head and give it to them and say, if you just stay on the straight and narrow, I said it before, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do and have some goals for yourself and what you want to do and achieve them for you. I think that's one way we may differ is you had that family structure. I didn't have it. I learned at a young age survival skills, I think, you know, you would say, and life survival skills. And part of that and that's kind of where the self-centered thing came from, is, you know, when I was living on my own, I was talking to myself at night. You know, I was by myself alone, living alone. And, you know, I'd say, you know, you got to do stuff for you. Like you've got to set goals for you. You've got to, you know, push ahead for you. You know, you got one life to live. And if you don't do it, you know, and I had friends, like you say, friends around you. I had friends around me that, you know, I went to New York and sold their butthole for a living, did drugs, you know, got tied up in all kinds of stuff. And I looked at it, I'm like, you know, I grew up around that. So I'm like, why would I ever, you know, want to influence my life and getting involved in that and take a chance on messing everything up? But I think that is the difference on you and I. The birth difference a little bit is I have that age, you know, 13 to 17-year-old, when I see a kid, you know, they're in a situation where they're struggling, I'm just like, you know, God, I was there. You know, I hope I can do something to put them on the path that I went on. And by the way, if they have those survival skills, I honestly believe, you know, it's weird to say they got a leg up on everybody else. You know, it's because they've had to fend for themselves a little bit and fight for themselves and you know, become a bit smarter, I would say. And I'm not saying that people that don't grow up in that situation don't have that, because there's many that do. You know, but I think that's one benefit that I got out of it. It's something that I have a different appreciation for when I look at kids, not just looking up at my dad, but, you know, looking sideways at kids.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I can understand that completely. But I think both with adoption, there is a lot more empathy for other people that aren't in the best situation, even with you being older when it happened. So like, I used to volunteer with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and like, I wasn't able to really. I guess I learned my lessons later on in life. My parents were those people that were like, just do your own thing. You're going to learn someday. Might not be today, but eventually you're going to figure it out and it will click. And I was a little bit of a late bloomer because I like to not really study and I like to party a little too hard for a long time. But once I got there, I realized like now I'm seamless. Now it's, it's one of those things where it's like once it clicks. But so volunteering with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, it's kind of the same thing where it's like you see a tragic situation and you're like, oh, I wish I could get that kid out of there. I wish there's something I could do to help. And for me, all it was really like get him out of the house. We get lunch or dinner or whatever, just make sure he had food, because there were times where he told me, he's like, I haven't ate in 2 days or something, right? And I mean, the house had holes in the walls. So it's winter in Indiana with 20-degree breeze blowing through so it was tough. And the thing that we kind of discussed the most, I guess, was I asked him, I guess he was in sixth grade. So he was a sixth grader. And I was like, where do you want to be? Like, what's the long-term goal? And of course, he had some crazy thing. Or no, he was younger in sixth grade. He was fourth grade. He was like, I want to be a UFC fighter. And I'm like, okay, so outside of UFC, what's the long-term goal, right? And so it's me trying to push him on school and being like, hey, I was an idiot, and now it's taking me time to get to where I need to be. You are now right in a place where you can actually make that change and get to where you need to be way sooner. And you say you want to get out of this house, you want to get out of like the situation you're in. This is how you do that. You got to apply yourself. It's not fighting with the dudes on the. It's not fighting. Yeah, it's like you can't fight with the dudes on the playground to try to learn how to be a UFC fighter. Go to the library. And so it worked. Like we got him, his grades went up and up and up and up, and it was awesome. But it's the same thing. Like I coached a lot of kids' sports. I always volunteered for coaching. And it's that whole same mentality of like, I just want to give back. I want to help kids. So I guess that has to be kind of something when you're adopted that's like, there's this thing of I want to help everybody I can. Maybe. I mean, it could just be personality too. I'm sure there's some jerks that were adopted that don't give a fuck about anybody. But
and I think it's, like I told you, I'm self-proclaimed weird. I only gravitate to the people that are trying to better themselves. Like if you're trying to get over or whatever, like, I mean, I got no time for you. Honestly, I don't. And you can see through and read through that. But it's the ones that are struggling that, are just trying to do everything that they can. And that, gets me.
Yeah. If there's a fight in the person, they're showing a fight to get better. It's like, I'll give you my time. But if there's no fight and you're just willing to stay stagnant, I'm like, sorry, dude, but tried to help you. And if you're not willing to try to move on, you're draining me, kind of. You know what I mean?
The attention they get is positive attention, and they want attention, by the way, but it's positive attention. It's reinforcement on the things that they probably already know, but they don't want to take on responsibility for. And when I see kids taking on personal responsibility, I call it invested in their own success, right? When you see that they're investing in their own success, it's like you just want to invest in them back.
Yeah, and I mean,
that was what I got. That was my parents. My dad never said it to me like that, but I think my dad and other people. I mean, there was people, begging me to come live with them at the time. But I think that's what my dad saw. I was pretty invested in my own success. I was going to school, I was trying to go to school, living on my own, and that's not the norm back then. Most people were like, I don't want to go to school. I'm gonna skip school, right, and not do this stuff. And I was trying to trying to get myself on the next stage in life.
Well, that's where we differ. If I would have been able to skip school and been on my own, I would have went. You were going, and I would have been like, "Hey, have fun in class." I mean,
I would have and could have, but I just in my ninth grade year, 10th grade year, I don't remember. I'm old; it gets kind of jumbled. But one year, I missed 53 days of school. Was still living with my mom. It's right before I left home. I think it's ninth grade, and just bad situation. And I learned there was nothing positive out of it. When I moved to South Carolina, I was living on my own. I took 2 Englishes and 2 maths one year to catch up, graduate on time. You had to do that. And teachers knew my situation too. That was kind of funny. A lot of teachers knew exactly the situation I was in. It was a shit show. And they looked the other way until they couldn't. And it just, I don't know what it's like today. I'm not a kid. I don't know what the schools are like, but man, God, the people that believed in me and invested in me and allowed me to do the things as a kid, that I did is just, kind of amazing. I don't think anybody did that today. And, probably 20 years before, people would have cared less. Lawyers and politicians have ruined all that. But anyways, I digress.
yeah. So the only other kind of personal thing, and this is interesting too, because this is where I didn't get into the military because I had bad hearing. I was born with bad hearing, right? So 9/11 happened. I'm like, I'm going to be a Marine. I was like, I want to get back to my country. I want to serve. So I go through all the testing, get to the hearing, and they're like, yeah, no, sorry. But so you go to the military, and is that maybe part of, was that wanting to get away from school to kind of like learn about yourself, maybe see the world, or was it giving back and wanting to?
Told you I'm self-proclaimed weird. Shit, I was the kid that like literally when I played football, skateboarded, I was playing roller hockey before, roller hockey was even cool. But, I used to get out there with all my friends, like, let's play Army. We get out there and I learned a lot from my friends, by the way. So we used to get out there and, we'd throw rocks at each other and all kinds of damn shit and just have, wars, whatever, beating each other with pugil sticks, like, we're bayoneting each other. I had one friend, I don't know why, but everywhere I lived, there was always like construction shit going on, right? So we get out there in these housing communities that they're building and they got all the, there's already ready-made foxholes and shit with all the stuff that's going on. I had a buddy of mine that got out there. He was Asian, funny as shit, like, because the Asian American thing back then, he was like, oh, okay, it's us against them type of thing. And he was the coolest fucking kid in the world. And he would get out there and he'd dig holes. Like literally dig holes and then cover them with newspaper and throw dirt on them. And people be running like, they fall in the damn hole. And I'm like, holy shit, take this stuff seriously. So I grew up watching, war flicks, black and whites, all that other shit. And I just, that was part of it. The other side of it was, and I mean, I'm patriotic, don't get me wrong, right? So there was the patriotic side of it and all of that shit. As I've gotten older, I've seen through some of the shit there, but I saw it as an opportunity for me to do something I wanted to do on my terms, that I signed up knowing that I was signing up and doing it. And I signed up for the hardest shit that I could do. And I didn't do it to really prove anything to myself. It's just what I always wanted to do. So I signed up as an airborne infantryman and then everything, went from there. And it was hard. At first, because when shit's new to you, it's kind of funny. My daughter's interviewing right now, and she had an interview this morning. She was like, "Yo, my stomach is all torn up. I was all nervous." And I'm like, Katie, I'm going to tell you something. My oldest daughter, she graduated college and yada yada yada. And I said, "I'll tell you something. You're going to learn you have anxiety in various stages of your life until you just don't have anxiety anymore." And I'm going to tell you, Craig, you get to a point where you just kind of don't give a fuck. And I know you're not there yet, and you'll get there at some point. But you'll be successful. You do the shit that you need to do. I'm not saying you don't care about people, but definitional learning is knowledge gained through experience. I said that in the other video. I say it in all the videos. That's a flight instructor thing for the military. I bring interns in, kids. I talk to them about this all the time. But you get life experiences, and like the first couple things that happen to you are just like overwhelming, right? It's like the first time you stump your toe. I'll give you a great example. Sports. I played football. I was a lineman. I love fucking hitting people. I tried to run the ball one time, somebody hit me and tackled me. I was like, holy shit, that hurt like a motherfucker. I'll never do that again. I just wanted to go cry, right? And then I watched these other people that do it. I'm like, shit, they get fucking knocked out of the air and get up like there's nothing to happen. That's conditioning. It's definition of learning, right? Knowledge gained through experience. And when you go through it enough, it's like, I cut my hand the other day working on a car. I didn't feel it, right? And that's what I tried to explain to her. In the Army, when I first went in, like everything was overwhelming until it wasn't. You master the skills of your job and what you're doing is one part of it, and you get that. By the way, you're always going to the next level of proficiency, which I love in the military. I learned so much in the military. But the other thing is you're always put in situations where, especially in training, you're put in situations to fail because you learn from your mistakes when you do fail. Believe it or not, when that happens. But you're also put in situations to understand that you can endure so much more. Even when you think you can't endure anymore, you can endure just a little bit more. And then when you endure that a little bit more and think you're done, you can endure just a little bit more, right? So your threshold and tolerance for some of that stuff goes up. And it's something that I was telling my daughter. And I know you asked me, about going to the military. But I think the military for me gave me, you know, when you master your stuff and you even be, everything in the military is competitive as shit, by the way. So, and I'm highly competitive. You never figured that out, right? So you're always competing on stuff, but when you get there, and that's the cool thing about the military is you're teaching the ones that come up below you and you're bringing them up as well. It's a team thing. There is no army of one. It is literally, it's an army. Everybody is one in the army. But to that point, I think that the military for me was something that I wanted to do as a kid. But when I went in, I found I got so much more out of it. By the way, I'll tell you this. When I talk to kids and I say, you won't understand this, but when I was a kid, I grew up doing this, Craig. Do you know what that is? I was looking up at everybody. My life situation, everything else, I looked up at everybody. When I looked at college, I'm like, there's no fucking way I go to college, right? I'm not that smart kid. I'm not this guy. I'm not that guy. What I learned was in the military, they, when I was over in Europe, they're like, hey, you got to take a semester of college while you're over here. And I'm like, wait, we got fucking time. In the field we're doing this, like, fucking figure it out. You need to do it. You got to do it for professional development. And I took a couple college classes. I'm like, wait, this is college? Like, wait a second. Huh? What? Wait, this is fucking hard, right? 40. And that's the other thing that I got out of it. And I don't recommend the military exchange. I went in, back in 1983. This is, this 30 years later. It's definitely changed, but when I was in, it was all about development. It was nobody was about themselves. Everybody was about everybody else. And you kind of learn that. And going in was the best thing I ever did for me because I probably would never go to college, but would have flunked out. I wouldn't be on the path that I'm on. And there's not a thing that I don't do in my daily life that there's not something tied back to the military. Now, there is an arrogance there, and there are some things that military people have and their swagger and whatever. I think I've lost some of that, right? I don't think I'm completely brainwashed anymore where, once upon a time, I would have, had a piss concertina wire and fucking eating shit or whatever, it took to do and didn't give a shit, right? Didn't ask questions on it. So you mature and you get around that. But, that's why I went in. And like literally they say be all, the saying back then was be all you could be. I had a couple people try to hold me back on some shit. Funny stories I could tell you all day long. But I had other people like, I got to fly high performance aircraft in the military. Who the fuck gets to do that? I was a kid, I was that fucking kid that, people looked at most likely to fucking die tomorrow. Right. And just wondered, I probably, people, I guarantee you, there was a lot of people and peers that looked, there's no fucking way that this dude's going to be fucking anything. And it's a funny thing is I never set out to prove anybody really wrong. I always just set out to prove to myself, what I could do. And the military gave me that capability. My dad, like I said in that other video, my dad said, volunteer for fucking everything. Like, this guy's trying to get me killed, but it's the insurance. He wants the insurance money. But you get the experiences of coming out of that. And, I got 100 times more out of it than I ever thought I would, just so you know. It sucked. There were times that it sucked. They made it suck. They made it suck even worse than it needed to suck. And, you had people around you that there were definitely some just dumb fucking shits in there. Not all of them, but there were some. And I was, platoon leaders and squad leaders that were just dumb fucking shits. They didn't hang around that much. And the other ones that were really good, were always about developing the individual. And that's something I try to get back. But anyways, I digress.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. I appreciate your service. Dude, I respect all those, like, both my grandfathers, I almost said grandparents, and grandmas did not, but both my grandfathers were one was Navy, one was Army. And, you know, my ex-brother-in-law was a Marine, and I have just tons of friends. And I don't, you know, it's different today. And obviously, it's ironically, I think, harder. I can talk to somebody that's older. Like, I can talk to a guy that went to Vietnam, and I think they've had time to process it. You know what I mean? So, but I have buddies that came back from Afghanistan that it's like, you're out when I used to drink, we'd have a couple of drinks and all of a sudden he's crying and he's, you know, and it's like, dude, I don't know what to tell you. So just knowing that they're going through all the crazy things they go through, I'm sure you went through crazy stuff, maybe whatever it was, you know, we all have those things. So you know, the fact that some people don't appreciate that, I'll never understand that, man. You know, we're kind of, we won't get into politics, but we're kind of the same. But freedoms, right? I mean, all those are actually amendments that I love.
Right.
And, you know, so it's one of those things. So I appreciate it, but we won't get too far into it, but I just wanted to say that real quickly.
I will say
things I had.
So soldiers that go in know what they're signing up for. They raise their right hand. They take an oath. Nobody puts a gun to their head. That's one of the greatest things about this country is they have an all volunteer army or service, whatever service you serve in. But I do think even though they volunteer and they sign up, they really, you know, like I was that young kid, right? You don't understand really what you're signing up for when you sign up. You really don't. Like, you really don't. You know, Iraq was you know bad, but the second wave in Afghanistan of the folks that are over there and coming back, I got a lot of friends that have gone over and come back, and it's not the same. You know, the latter years just you know not the same when we had the troops over there, and you know they're struggling and dealing with a lot of stuff. You know that they saw they've got to live with. Some are good, you know. A lot of us get to compartmentalize shit. I compartmentalize a lot of things in my life, and I learned that. It's a survival skill that I learned, I think, as a kid. A lot of people don't have that, you know, and it's tough, right? You know, 22 too many is real. I don't think that we do enough to recognize, you know, the guys that are going over and doing this, even though they volunteered, you know, they're going to hell. And just when they think hell is over, you know, they're still there and, you know, shit's going on and you're in hell for a while. And you come back to society and it's hard to fit, it's hard to process, and it's hard to let go of everything that happened over there because it's going to be a part of you the rest of your life. And, you know, I think politics aside, you know, I think the best investment that we can do as citizens is make sure that we set aside. And it's guys that were downrange and dealt with that shit, right? Because I'm not saying that people do, but there are people that milk the fucking system. Tammy Duckworth, I went to flight school with Tammy, and a lot of people talk shit about Tammy in Illinois and whatever. She's liberal this and liberal that, and I don't like liberalism with the rest of them. But I can tell you right now, Tammy Duckworth, when it comes to taking care of soldiers and calling shit what it is, she fights for them and has. And I'm not endorsing her or saying anything, but that's a lady that's, you know, she's missing body parts and lost them in Iraq. And, you know, I think that for those that come back that are really, you know, really wounded, especially mentally wounded, we got to do everything that we can, you know, to get them back into society and help them heal, because they'll never forget, right? And it's the wounds that they carry, you know, the things we carry. There's a good book out there, but the wounds and the bags that they carry, you know, they carry with them forever. And the only thing that we can try to do is help give them coping skills and teach them how to compartmentalize it. But you know, some of them just, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot to see. And
Yeah.
you know, when you talk about it, if you never experienced it, never been through it, it's just, there's no way you can describe it. So, but I digress.
No, yeah. And I mean, that was the whole thing. Like, I'm sitting there with buddies that came back that are starting to think about all that stuff after a couple of drinks, and people are like trying to calm them down. I'm like, no, just leave them alone. Like, you weren't there. We weren't there.
Right.
Nothing we can say to that person right now is going to help, except for you can be like, hey, man, I'm here for you if you need anything, but you can't be like, it's going to be okay. Everything's fine. It's like,
those are the 2 words, 2 or 3 words you can say. It's going to be okay. if you say anything to somebody, it's going to be okay. And honestly, that's the reinforcement words that, you know, a lot of people need to hear. You're here now. It's okay. It's going to be okay, right? Because they're not
Right.
that. And that's the, you know, that's the, as a kid, like as a father, when your kids, you know, get hurt or do something, like the number one words out of my mouth sometimes, what the fuck did you do? But really, it
Right.
should be, hey, you're okay, and it's going to be okay, right? You're going to be okay. Are you okay? You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay.
Right. And that was the big thing that would be frustrating was I had one buddy that I kind of babysat in a way because it became this normal thing of him just trying to process it. That was his way of processing it. Unfortunately, I wish he would have been able to do it when he was sober so that it maybe was more impactful than when you're drinking. But I would have to kind of defend him from people that would say the wrong things. I'm like, just leave him alone right now. Like, if you're going to say anything, be like, hey, man, I'm here for you, and you'll be okay. But don't be like, you're fine. Don't worry about it. It's over. You're here. We love. I'm like, you know, so that's the thing is I don't think a lot of people understand the approach to that sometimes. And
Well, it's like somebody has cancer. You know, cancer
that's
is,
not just yeah, but that's not just veterans either. I mean, that's anything. And
yeah, it is.
like you can't just approach everybody thinking you have the solution to what they're going through. If you walk up to me, I have Crohn's really bad. If I'm having a flare and I feel like crap and you're like, oh, you're going to be fine. It's like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm going to crap my pants and I'm going to have stomach cramps and it's you're wrong. Like, go away. So it doesn't matter the situation, but yeah. So anyways, yeah.